You're looking at the most endangered wild tree species on Earth. Its lineage stretches back more than 200 million years. It weathered ice ages, survived super-volcanic eruptions, and outlasted the breakup of entire continents. And yet today, this ancient survivor exists in a state of almost unbearable fragility. This is the Wollemi pine. For decades, scientists assumed it had gone extinct roughly 2 million years ago. That assumption collapsed in 1994, when a park ranger stumbled onto a hidden grove tucked deep inside a remote canyon. Right now, only 89 of these trees survive in the wild. And if you try to find them, you're risking a $300,000 fine and up to 2 years in prison. That's just the surface of an extraordinary conservation effort. What follows is a story involving blindfolded scientists, a covert wartime-style firefighting mission, and a strategy so unconventional it managed to dismantle a global black market almost overnight. It was September 10, 1994. David Noble, an officer with the New South Wales National Parks Service, was doing what he loved on his day off, exploring uncharted terrain in the Blue Mountains wilderness northwest of Sydney. Deep inside Wollemi National Park, Noble and 2 companions were scouting for new rock climbing routes when something stopped him in his tracks. Tucked into a remote sandstone gorge surrounded by tree ferns and the sound of trickling water, stood a cluster of trees unlike anything in the Australian landscape. These weren't eucalyptus, and they weren't typical rainforest species either. Their trunks rose straight upward toward gaps in the canopy, and their bark had a strange, bubbled texture, dark brown, almost like solidified chocolate. Noble had spent years cataloging native plant life across New South Wales, but he had never seen anything like this. The foliage looked almost fern-like. Curious, he took a small sample and packed it away. Back at headquarters, nobody on staff could identify the specimen. It eventually reached botanists at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Sydney. And that's when everyone realized exactly what they were looking at. This wasn't simply an unrecorded species. It represented an entirely new genus, one that had previously existed only as fossil impressions in rock. The tree belonged to the Araucariaceae family, ancient conifers that dominated forests during the age of dinosaurs. Fossil records suggested this particular lineage had disappeared roughly 2 million years earlier. When researchers announced the find in December 1994, it became global news. Carrick Chambers, then director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, compared it to discovering a living dinosaur. The press quickly nicknamed it the dinosaur tree and hailed it as the most significant botanical discovery of the century. Even amid the celebration, Australian authorities faced an immediate and difficult question. How do you protect something that the entire world suddenly wants to see? Within months, officials made a decision with no real precedent in plant conservation. They would never publicly disclose the grove's exact coordinates. That information would remain classified, accessible only to a small circle of researchers and park managers. This wasn't bureaucratic overcaution. It reflected hard lessons learned almost immediately. During one of the earliest scientific expeditions in 1995, a helicopter's rotor blades clipped and damaged part of a tree's crown by accident, and despite the best intentions of everyone involved. If trained scientists exercising extreme care could still cause harm, the risks of public knowledge were obvious. Then, in late 2005, a routine health inspection turned up something far more alarming. Several younger trees were showing yellowing foliage, thinning canopies, and weakened root structures. Lab testing confirmed the worst-case scenario. Phytophthora cinnamomi had reached the grove. Despite its name, Phytophthora cinnamomi isn't a fungus. It's a water mold, a microscopic organism that produces swimming spores capable of devastating entire plant communities. In Australia, it's nicknamed the biological bulldozer for how thoroughly it can eliminate native vegetation. It works by attacking root systems, effectively starving trees by cutting off their access to water and nutrients. What made the discovery especially troubling was that the pathogen had no business being in that pristine canyon ecosystem at all. Someone had carried it in from outside. This wouldn't have been quite so catastrophic if it weren't for a deeper vulnerability hidden in the species' DNA. Genetic analysis revealed that the Wollemi pine had passed through an extreme population bottleneck sometime between 10,000 and 26,000 years ago, a near-total genetic wipeout that left every surviving tree in the grove essentially a clone of the others, all descended from perhaps one or two individuals that made it through the last ice age. That genetic uniformity means the species has virtually no natural defense diversity against new threats. If the pathogen could kill one Wollemi pine, it had the potential to kill every single one of them. The contamination scare validated every extreme protective measure already in place, and it pushed the protocols even further. Today, the handful of people cleared to visit the site must scrub their boots and equipment with methylated spirits before entering the canyon. Some researchers have even been blindfolded during helicopter transport, specifically to prevent them from memorizing visual landmarks that might reveal the location. In 2005, the New South Wales government formally designated the canyon as critical habitat under state conservation law, giving these protective measures legal teeth. All of this exposes a strange contradiction. Here is a species that captivates people worldwide, a living connection to the age of dinosaurs, a near-miraculous survival story. And yet that very fascination is what threatens to destroy it. Every person eager to see these trees in their natural setting is also a potential carrier of the disease that could wipe them out entirely. As Dr. Kathy Offord of the National Parks and Wildlife Service has put it, people assume they can visit without leaving any trace, and that assumption simply isn't true. A single gram of contaminated soil is enough. There is no known cure. Conservationists eventually realized that secrecy alone was creating its own problem, an underground market driven by scarcity and mystique. So, they adopted a counterintuitive strategy. Rather than fighting the human desire to own a piece of this living fossil, they decided to satisfy it openly, legally, and at scale. If anyone could simply buy a Wollemi pine through legitimate channels, there would be little reason for collectors to risk prison time stealing one from the wild. In October 2005, Sotheby's Australia held what organizers called the Botanical Sale of the Century. 292 young Wollemi pine saplings, all propagated from cuttings taken off the wild trees, went up for auction in Sydney. Bidders from around the globe competed for a piece of living prehistory, and the results blew past every expectation. Total sales topped 1.15 million Australian dollars. One lot of just 15 saplings alone sold for $149,000. The average price per plant landed near $4,000, roughly triple the pre-auction estimate. Critically, every dollar raised went directly back into Wollemi pine conservation. The trees were, quite literally, funding their own protection. By 2006, Wollemi pines were showing up on shelves in garden centers across Australia, the UK, and the United States, priced around $50 to $100, well within reach of ordinary gardeners rather than just wealthy collectors. A species that had been the rarest tree on the planet a year earlier was now growing in backyards from Sydney to Seattle. The mass cultivation effort produced an unexpected side benefit. It turned into one of the largest citizen science projects ever conducted for an endangered species. Thousands of home gardeners became, without quite realizing it, field researchers, testing how the trees performed under wildly different climates and soil conditions. In 2023, scientists published findings drawn from a survey of more than 1,500 growers spanning 31 countries. The data showed these ancient trees were far more adaptable than anyone had anticipated. They thrived in temperate climates with reliable rainfall, tolerated both heat and cold better than expected, and grew successfully across a wide range of soil types. One grower in France reported a specimen reaching over 8 meters in just 14 years. Growers in Scotland documented trees surviving temperatures as low as -12 degrees Celsius. That crowdsourced data turned out to be conservation gold. It directly informed decisions about where to establish translocation sites, secret backup locations where young Wollemi pines could be planted as insurance against disaster striking the original grove. Perhaps the most technically sophisticated development came in 2024 with what researchers called the Global Meta-Collection Project. Advanced genetic sequencing revealed something nobody expected. Despite appearing genetically identical on the surface, the wild population actually contained 6 distinct genetic strains, subtle variations invisible to earlier testing methods. Scientists propagated representatives of each strain and distributed 174 young trees across 28 botanical gardens throughout the UK and Europe. By 2019, tens of thousands of Wollemi pines were thriving in cultivated gardens worldwide, even as the original wild grove remained completely hidden and protected. Then, near the end of that same year, Australia's climate delivered a brutal reminder that some threats can't simply be outsourced to gardeners. The 2019 to 2020 fire season became known as Black Summer, the most destructive in the country's recorded history. Across New South Wales alone, fires consumed more than 5 million hectares, an area larger than the entire nation of Costa Rica. In November 2019, the Gospers Mountain Fire ignited northwest of Sydney. Within weeks, it had grown into a monster, tearing through the Blue Mountains region and consuming everything in its path. Fire maps showed it heading directly toward the classified canyon, where fewer than 100 Wollemi pines remained. Park managers faced an impossible bind. The grove had survived in secrecy for 25 years precisely because people stayed away from it. Now saving it would demand the most intensive human intervention the species had ever experienced. In late December 2019, under heavy secrecy, specialist remote area firefighters were helicoptered directly into the canyon. Their mission: install an irrigation system capable of keeping the grove saturated even as fire swept overhead. Working non-stop, the team rigged pumps and sprinklers fed by the canyon's natural water sources, soaking not just the trees themselves, but the surrounding terrain to create a buffer zone of wet vegetation and saturated soil. Meanwhile, aerial tankers ran precision water bombing missions directly over the grove and its approaches. When the smoke cleared in January 2020, aerial photographs showed something remarkable: a ribbon of green Wollemi pines standing upright amid a landscape of blackened rock and ash. The trees had survived, protected by what was likely the most expensive and technically elaborate firefighting operation ever mounted to save a single plant species. The relief came with a sobering realization. The 2019 fires weren't a freak event. They were a preview of what climate change has in store for the region. That recognition reshaped the next phase of conservation strategy: building out a wider network of secret backup populations across multiple sites, so the loss of any single location could never mean total extinction. A species that had survived for millions of years through isolation now depended entirely on continuous human management to persist at all. The wild population currently sits at 45 mature trees and 46 juveniles, almost exactly where things stood when the crisis first emerged. The Phytophthora infection, identified back in 2005, is still present in the grove. Affected trees now receive regular phosphite injections, a chemical treatment that strengthens their natural defenses and slows the pathogen's progress. The translocation program, meanwhile, has quietly grown into one of the most ambitious rewilding efforts in Australian history. At least 3 secret sites now host backup populations, each chosen for geological similarity to the original canyon, but positioned far enough apart that no single disaster could wipe out everything at once. Those backup sites have faced their own setbacks. The 2019 fires that threatened the main grove also destroyed most of the first translocation site, killing hundreds of carefully planted saplings. Rather than retreating from the strategy, managers doubled down, replanting damaged sites and establishing new ones by 2021. The cultural shift has been just as striking as the ecological one. The Wollemi pine has become something of a diplomatic symbol for Australia. Prime ministers now present saplings to visiting foreign leaders as gifts, a living emblem of the country's prehistoric natural heritage paired with its modern conservation expertise. The challenges ahead remain serious. Climate models point toward increasingly severe droughts and heat waves across southeastern Australia, and the narrow microclimate that has sheltered these trees for millions of years could become uninhabitable within decades. Still, this story stands as proof that determined, creative conservation can produce genuine miracles. Through classified locations, a deliberate flooding of the commercial market, and coordinated global cultivation, a species reduced to its last handful of individuals has been given a real shot at long-term survival. The dinosaur tree that nearly vanished in total secrecy now grows in gardens around the world, a reminder that extinction isn't inevitable, provided we're willing to fight it.